First Nations people don't want to dig up their land to extract resources. They want to preserve it for the next generations because their nutrient systems are preserved in those environments.
You're watching the Spotlight Network. Starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford. Streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now we're diving into the natural world's genius with Teaching Design for Sustainable Living Part 2, Nature, Earth Sustainable Architect. It's written by a terrific author. His name is McKay Nunn. This powerful guide reveals how nature's ecosystems hold the keys to creating a truly sustainable future. The book is packed with insights, real-world solutions, and a compelling call to action. And it will empower the next generation to become custodians of our fragile planet. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today. We thank the team at Books to Life Marketing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Ian, thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure, Logan.
Great to have you on the show. It's a wonderful book. It'll give a lot of people insight into our beautiful planet. You describe nature as Earth's sustainable architect. Tell us a little bit more about that thought.
Traditional people have used materials in their own location, their own habitat. And so that they're not having to exert energy producing materials in order for shelter. So Earth itself bonds. We're aware of bricks which are made, and they're fired earth. But there's also using what's available around you as your resource to provide your shelter. And I mean, I've just realized that some people simply dug into this to build extensive caves on cliffs and that sort of thing. But we're now realizing that utilizing the materials that are in our local environment, it's not requiring the sort of investment in energy and natural resources that buildings and infrastructure has in the past.
Talk to us a little bit about how studying ecosystems help us build and create better designs for living.
Nature has evolved to provide its own solutions to survival, basically. So a plant uses the resources around it. If I might take an example of a rainforest, you've got massive trees and they suck up water through their roots, up the trunks, out the branches, the limbs, into the leaves. And from the air, they absorb carbon dioxide. And together with the water and the carbon dioxide, they get a little bit of help from the sun. When the sun falls on the leaves, you get an electrochemical activity in the stoma of the leaves, and then that combines the carbon and the water to produce a sugar, glucose, and then oxygen is released. They don't do this by themselves. They need nutrients as well, which is supplied to the roots by fungi network. But the fungi network doesn't deliver the nutrients until the tree will deliver some carbon to the fungi in the form of the glucose. So it's a symbiotic relationship. The organisms have evolved to use one another to provide a nutrient cycle. So if we can adapt our means of production to that type of thinking, getting it to be, apologise for the delay, to be sympathetic to the environment, it's going to be far more sustainable. Yep, sorry.
Yeah.
No. Are any of these practices being utilized now in the world? Are there places where this type of practice is used and striking a balance between using and conserving natural resources?
There are many companies attempting to be sustainable in their production, so that they are identifying what it is to be sustainable. Avoiding consuming more raw materials is I see, the essential thing to do. And that, again, I apologise for.
Yeah, so we should try to avoid using materials that are not sustainable as much as possible in our construction and so forth.
Yes, using raw materials is very expensive in terms of manpower, energy, and materials to extract the materials, and then to make the product, and then so if they can avoid using more raw materials, they're going to go a long way to be sustainable.
Talk to us about
One of
the
the ways
lesson.
to do that.
Go ahead.
One of the ways to do that is to make a modular design, so that when a product has a problem, it can be identified more readily. And then the faulty module is returned to the manufacturer. They hopefully would improve it. It goes back to the product, which allows the product to continue its performance. So there's no need to buy a new product for starters. The product will continue to work. There's no more need for new resources. No energy required. No more resources need to be extracted from the earth. So it's a cyclic maintenance.
Sounds like a win-win for sure. Talk to us a little bit about what lessons we can learn from forests as self-sustaining ecosystems.
The Atlantic forest in Brazil comes to mind. It's the home to the mariki, also known as the woolly spider monkey. It consumes the large fruit from the largest trees and then deposits the fertilized seed on the ground. Hopefully these fall or are distributed away from the parent tree to regenerate the forest, which grows the largest tree species, which absorbs the most carbon. But again, these giant trees need the support of the mycelium network, the fungi, to provide their nutrient.
Yeah. Amazing that you have the giant mammoth trees supported by the fungi, which is so much smaller in size. But like you said, they've created a symbiotic relationship that they both thrive off of each other. Talk to us about how modern agriculture has impacted local ecosystems.
The problem soon started after the Green Revolution. The island of Nauru was virtually leveled to mine seabird guano, which was the deposits from seabirds, which contained nitrogen and phosphorus, which came from fish. So you might see that how the species are linked by their food cycles. And that industrialization took hold of agriculture, broadacre cropping. And there's also now large cattle pens, which are like a chicken battery for cattle, bare dirt pens into which grains are trapped from broadacre cropping. And the demand for these crops is increasing, and native bushland is being laser leveled to produce pyramids of these monoculture grains.
Talk to us a little bit about seasonal changes and their ecological importance, particularly in this time of climate change.
I will. I saw a video recently, and it's produced by NASA, and it's actually showing us the amount of CO2, carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere at various times. And in the Northern Hemisphere winter, you have a lot of CO2 being produced. We actually produced 100 million tonnes of CO2 a day. That's 36 billion tonnes over 1 year. And that's what's being added to our atmosphere every day. And that basically builds up in the Northern Hemisphere winter because your forests aren't active. In summer, that concentration of carbon dioxide actually reduces miraculously because the forests are taking the carbon dioxide and, in effect, putting more oxygen back into the atmosphere. So seasons are crucially important to our condition of the air we breathe. Yeah.
Yeah, although they're being impacted, of course, by the pollutants that
Yes.
we're putting into the air. Talk to us a
Yes.
little bit about why it's so vital, so important to prepare the next generation to be environmental custodians.
Well, now that we've made this magnificent transition to sustaining 8 billion people on our planet, we can't afford to provide the resources that we're now consuming as in prosperous Western society. The wildlife cannot compete, and it's losing its habitat at a devastating rate. It just can't continue. I'll give you an example. In the DRC, in the Congo Basin, The forest trees are being felled and burnt to produce charcoal, and it's for the impoverished population for cooking and heating. Armed gangs are now controlling the char trade, and at the same time, barges are taking out unregulated quantities of timber down the coast for export. The government complains that Western governments have reneged on promised funds to store the carbon in the forest trees. So now the forests are becoming sand heaps from unregulated mining. We need to preserve the forests, not utilise them as a place of resource. That they are essential to the planet's health. And our health is totally dependent on the health of our habitat.
Agreed. And custodians for the future are needed in the next generation for sure to understand this connection between nature and human and life and our environment. Talk to us a little bit about your feelings if nature-based design can realistically influence large-scale industry. Do you feel that it can be implemented in large-scale industries, nature-based design?
It confronts the problem of economics. Industry seems to be hand in hand with government, which they have political donations for the politicians so that they can maintain the policy for the currency holders. I don't know. I'm sort of at that point where I'm becoming quite depressed about the lack of interest in governments taking an alternative view. So, which is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. It's going to have to be a grassroots force to make people understand we have to look after our habitats.
How do you feel
But
that people... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
There are people who are definitely interested and motivated to present alternatives which use sustainable materials. We'll often see labels now with sustainably sourced material. The extraction of any raw material disturbs every species in that habitat. If lucky, they're relocated. What if management processes for extracting these materials were sensitive enough that it could actually support all the organisms in that habitat? What if? A worker who can contribute to the efficiency and the ecological sustainability of that factory is going to have in mind that that company is considering the global environment. Just imagine the pride that will build in that company.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll help maintain employees and make the company stronger. I think people appreciate a company that has worthwhile goals and a worthwhile principles that they hope to achieve. Talk to us a little bit about how individuals, how people reading your book can apply the principles from your book to their daily lives.
Well, it's making the connection to your habitat Look at better ways of doing things. I did find out that to be sustainable, I should be planting 400 trees annually. There's the other part of the equation, reduce your carbon impact. You can either balance it by planting more trees, grow anything that absorbs carbon through photosynthesis. Greening the environment has a multitude of benefits as well. As an individual species, humans are attracted to natural habitats. We breathe easily, we're relaxed, we enjoy them. So have some interest in your habitat.
Yeah.
Just take a step. For example, plant a few trees or plants that provide blooms for nectar feeding species, native bees, beetles, species that are beneficial to the environment.
Yeah.
If you're not sure, look to role models. See what other people do. Ask people who are interested. People will always tell you what they are doing.
Absolutely. Small steps can mean big progress, particularly if we all work together. Talk to us a little bit
Yes.
about the significance of Workbook 2, Why Study Nature?
Yeah, it's again, it's bringing it back to a individual level, getting people to look at their habitat, their environment, and finding out what they identify with. If they can identify with something in their own environment, they're going to be interested in its health. And so if you can make that connection that what a person does influences the environment, and they will be mindful of what they do in life as far as how it affects their own environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How do you see indigenous knowledge playing a role in sustainable innovation?
First Nations people have been custodians of our habitat for millions of years. We've sort of simultaneously acknowledged their knowledge and marginalised their knowledge as well. I'll give you an example. Scientists were intrigued by the widespread use of the Madagascar periwinkle in the 1950s. They found that the vinca alkaloids that it contained, which was used in their traditional medicines, was very useful in treating cancer. Those drugs are still in production now, but I'm afraid very little of that profit trickles back to the communities where that knowledge was derived. Looking at the care of forests, we look to Indigenous people to guide us in that regard. In our top end, we have native custodians who have developed a treatment of the land which involves burning off at cool times to maintain the forest in a condition which is not decimated by large bushfires, to keep the dead growth under control. And they are actually attracting carbon credits for their work. So it's understanding that human activity is the cause of the crisis, and it's also up to individuals to help to rehabilitate the environment, and to look at what those First Nations of people have done. First Nations people don't want to dig up their land to extract resources. They want to preserve it for the next generations because their nutrient systems are preserved in those environments. The non-Indigenous people think we can control nature, but Indigenous people look at the environment from what they can learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to be learned from those people, no doubt. What's your vision for a sustainably designed future, both globally and locally?
Our main problem is the emissions of carbon dioxide. We need to halt carbon dioxide emissions now. Coal-fired power stations contribute perhaps a third of the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Agriculture contributes a third. I see power generation needing to be more localised, preferably at the point of consumption. Volcanoes have appeared on every continent, and many islands are formed by them. Their remains of that volcanic activity are a clue to where magma has flowed through the crust. We have an industry very experienced in drilling miles down through the crust to find oil. We could use that technology to find hot rock, which, when water contacts hot rock, steam expands. That steam can power turbines to drive generators to produce electricity 24 hours a day, irrespective of whether the sun is shining or whether it's at night, 365 days a year for many lifetimes. We don't have to spend billions of dollars building fusion reactors to heat water, to drive turbines, to create our electricity. We can actually use the Earth's own heat source.
Amazing, amazing. There's so much to be learned in this book and from you, sir. You've done terrific work, not only on this interview, but in writing the pages of this wonderful book. It's called Teaching Design for Sustainable Living. It is a blueprint for building harmony between humanity and the planet. Ian, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Pleasure. Thank you, Logan.
Pleasure's been all mine. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time.